This is a special production of ABC News.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Engines beginning throttling down now. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink.
No downlink, no further communication from the space shuttle. Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline. The death of Challenger and of 7 American pioneers.
Sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
The impact of today's tragedy on space exploration, on national security, and on all Americans. That's our story tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
We need help in discovering meaning in what happened today, and we hope that some of our guests will be able to provide it. Chuck Yeager, the prototype of the American test pilot. Ray Bradbury, whose visions of what lies beyond our world help prepare us for reality. We need help in coming to terms with the latest graphic television image. It has become as familiar as the other television images that mark a particular tragedy or near tragedy for us. The Kennedy images from Dallas and Los Angeles, Martin Luther King in Memphis, and President Reagan's brush with death here in Washington. And now the image of Challenger clinging like a moth to an orange silo, rolling slowly onto its back, and finally exploding into fire and graceful white tendrils of smoke. Television has served all day and will serve for some time yet to come as the national mechanism by which we begin to vent our grief and our curiosity all at once. It is also the mechanism by which our leaders try to point the rest of us toward the purpose in what today at least seems like such a tragic waste. As Nightline correspondent Jed Duval reports, the astronauts who died today were cut from a familiar and terribly important strip of cloth.
They were more than astronauts, of course, more than swashbucklers. They had the spirit of the seeker, the explorer, the one who wants to reach the edge of experience and have a look.
They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them.
They were part of us, chosen from among 230 million Americans, and they took us with them out there to the edges. Each one is part of a group of darers in history, those who went out looking, groping into the unknown.
Amelia Earhart did it herself, braving bad weather and a terrifying 3,000-foot drop when her aircraft iced up. Earhart became the first woman to solo across the Atlantic.
A generation before Judy Resnick, an aerial pioneer by the name of Amelia Earhart had flown across the Atlantic by herself and was trying to go around the world when she disappeared in 1937. Today we can take flying for granted because there were Amelia Earharts. You can think of Ronald McNair as the same sort of darer as Maxie Anderson and Don Ida. They were 2 American balloonists killed in a balloon race in Germany 2.5 years ago. Anderson, who had ridden a balloon across the Atlantic, once said, "Maybe we're all crazy, but someone must do this."
Why do people do these things? For a buck? No, drug dealers do it for money. For fame?
There are easier ways to that. Why have people always done it? For the wonder of it. To go out there and look back at the blue planet. Or to go up, up, up a mountain. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine did that, went up Mount Everest, and died in the attempt, at the top or short of it, we'll never know. It was Mallory who said, when asked why climb Everest, because it is there. Challenger Commander Francis Dick Scobie would understand. Because it is there. They have that to share, you see. If not time and place, they share the spirit, the dare, and the wonder.
Spirit, bravery, and commitment are what make not only the space program, but all of life worthwhile. We must never, as people in our daily lives or as a nation, stop exploring, stop hoping, stop discovering. We must press on.
Is not Mike Smith, Navy commander and the pilot of the Challenger, cut from the same cloth as the leaders of the expedition 400 years ago that brought the first English settlers to America? The very first ones, daring something, seeking something, who died at Roanoke Island, North Carolina's lost colony. Soon we'll know more about what killed the 7 today than has ever been discovered about what killed those early seekers. Without them and those who followed, history, and our lives, of course, would be very different. Colonel on the South Pole, Scott and 4 others started out in late 1911, found the pole early the next year. Later, the bodies of all 5 were found with their diaries. Without the Robert Scotts, we wouldn't know there was a South Pole. Without Marie Curie, we wouldn't have X-rays. Did she know the chances when she worked with radium and eventually contracted leukemia? Did Christa McAuliffe know the chances? Did either woman think about those chances? Was exploring too. He was to conduct the science tests aboard the spaceship. He and the others were reachers for something special. They had, in some ungenetic way, inherited a spirit that takes them over the land, over the sea, over the air. They lead, and we follow.
On this day 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his historian later said, he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today, we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete.
The old Navy hymn, Eternal Father, that mourns and salutes the seafarers, got a new verse after the birth of aerialists, the aviators. That verse goes, Lord, guard and guide the men who fly through the great spaces in the sky. Be with them always in the air, in darkening storms or sunlight fair. Oh, hear us when we lift our prayer for those in peril in the air. Jed Duval for Nightline from Washington.
Not that all our pioneers die in the attempt. When test pilot Chuck Yeager set out to break the sound barrier in October 1947, many thought his aircraft would explode. It didn't, and later the World War II hero expanded the limits of flight even further, becoming the first person to fly at over 1,600 miles an hour, more than twice the speed of sound. General Yeager joins us now live from our affiliate KOVR in Sacramento, California. And in our Washington bureau, Senator Jake Garn of Utah, who last April was a crew member on Discovery in Shuttle Mission 16. Senator Garn was the first lawmaker to fly in space. But General Yeager, I want to start with you, and I hope you're going to be able to help us, as I suggested at the beginning of this program, understand what it is that motivates men like you and women like those who died today.
Well, Ted, I think one of the big things that myself, for instance, I had a duty to perform back in 1947 when I was flying the X-1. That was research flying, and I equate it a lot like combat flying. When you are sent into a war and you fly a mission, you don't give an awful lot of thought about the outcome. What you do, you weigh the rewards against the risk. And I think that same attitude follows right on into our space program. the guys and gals who were involved in the unfortunate accident today made an evaluation. They weighed the risk against the rewards that they were after, and that's the way I think all people look at this who are involved in it.
Now, you understand, those of us who are not involved in it, and a great many millions of Americans obviously are not personally involved, will have to see those risks as weighing a lot heavier than the rewards today. So help rectify that balance a little bit for us.
Are the things that we find in space, and all of the research that goes on and has gone on for a long, long time, opening up new frontiers of aviation and space research. And the one thing, if you fly on a commercial airliner today, you accept it as very little risk, yet people get killed on commercial airliners. And we are and will be faced with that same problem for a long time when you start fooling with high-tech equipment.
I thought you were going to go in a slightly different direction. I thought you were going to say that because of the work that men and women like you and other test pilots have done, we are able to travel as comfortably and as securely on commercial planes today. I guess one of the questions that I have to ask you is, where do these flights, the kind of flight that went so awry today, where is that going to be taking us?
That will be taking us for many, many years into deep space research and development. The one thing that we're seeing happening today is the beginning of space exploration, and consequently what's coming about within the next 30, 40 years, you'll see a great deal of commercialization in space, and you'll see many companies involved in space technology developing new systems, new products, and also opening up deep space to uncover what is on Mars, for instance, or what are some of the moons of yours really made of. And that's what we see coming out of this whole space program. And yes, it's unfortunate that we lost the shuttle today, but in my opinion, it won't have a long-term effect on our space program per se. It'll have an immediate effect on the shuttle because obviously we won't launch as many payloads as we had planned this year. But as far as long-term effect, I don't think it'll have any effect at all because we've had something like this or similar accidents prior to today's shuttle. But we always regroup, find out what caused them, fix it, and press on.
Senator Garn, you bridge that gap between those of us who have never flown or who look at it strictly from the ground and those who have. You've done both. You are a legislator. You are dealing with the reality of whether, in fact, manned flight now is going to be manned flight.
Only very temporarily. First of all, we can't fly again until we do determine what the cause of the accident was and know how to fix it so that it doesn't happen again. But we can't stop. Ted, tonight I was with the Vice President down at Cape Canaveral. I met with the families in an extremely difficult time for them. Very hard to know what to say. You feel very inadequate. But Mrs. Scobie stood up before any of us said anything, and she said, "Mr. Vice President, Senators, we don't want the space program stopped. We don't want it slowed down, despite the tragedy that we have so personally felt today." And she said, "We know that our loved ones would feel that way." And she's right. I knew Mike Smith. I trained with him. He helped me for the first month of my training. I knew each one of them. It was a personal tragedy. But I can say the same thing. They would want us to go ahead. And General Yeager is being modest because what he said about commercial airliners today, because of great heroes of aviation like him. That's why we take commercial airline flying today for granted, because of people like him who push the frontiers. We'll see that happen in space. We're only at the beginning of space flight, like we were at the beginning of aviation when my father was a pilot in World War I. Everybody thought he was crazy when he was a pilot in 1917. And yet, because of those kind of pioneers, we all enjoy the benefits today. When I look at the spin-offs from the space program already, what we've learned in geography and geology, oceanography, volcanology, how we've improved navigation, how we've improved communications all over the world, as you find in TV and our telephones, what we've done in medicine, more than 12,000 medical devices and or procedures developed from space research, the pacemaker. Charlie Walker was the payload specialist I flew with. He was operating the electrophoresis machine. developing medications in zero gravity. You're going to find a cure for a major disease in space someday, and that'll justify every dime we've spent from the beginning of the space program. It's just unlimited what we're going to be able to do, and the space program must continue despite this terrible tragedy.
Senator Garn, you and General Yeager have well set the tone for us, but we've got a lot of very tough questions to address, and I hope answer in the course of this program. Please, gentlemen, both of you stay with us. Understandably, our focus tonight is on the loss of 7 brave people, but today's tragedy is going to set a lot of programs back and put a lot of schedules out of kilter. When we come back, we'll talk about those problems with former NASA official David Williamson. He says that losing at least one shuttle in some form of accident was a virtual certainty. And we'll be talking with Marcia Smith, who heads a national commission that's been looking at what our long-term goals in space ought to be.
1986 was scheduled to be the most ambitious year in shuttle history. 15 flights were planned, some just 3 weeks apart. Among the missions, in March, astronomers were to observe Halley's Comet from shuttle orbit. In May, a shuttle was to be tested as a launching base for interplanetary expeditions. A joint American-European mission was to study the sun. And in September, a billion-dollar telescope was to be released by a shuttle, which would allow scientists to see 7 times deeper into space than is possible from Earth.
With us now live in our Washington Bureau, David Williamson, former Assistant Administrator of NASA for Special Projects and a veteran of the U.S. space program. Joining us from our affiliate KSTP in Minneapolis-St. Paul, Marcia Smith, President of the American Astronautical Society and Executive Director of the National Commission on Space. The commission was organized to suggest long-term goals for the U.S. space program to the President and the Congress, and it is scheduled to make a formal report on March 1st. Mr. Williamson, you and I had the chance to speak a little bit earlier, and you said that it was statistically certain, or viewed as statistically certain, that one of these days what happened today would happen. Explain that, would you?
Back in '71, when we began really seriously building the space shuttle, one of the questions that obviously came to mind was how many do you build, and under what circumstances then do you have an attrition problem, that is to say, loss of the hardware. We were not in the Apollo program, we were in something quite new. We were trying to invent, essentially, a space airline, an operational thing. Operational devices have always, because of the amount of traffic, had difficulties at some point in their development cycle. Every airplane that flies has had its accidents. We knew that if we were going to build just a very few shuttles, they were going to have to be extraordinary devices, and we had to count on having one ground loop while landing, for example. Something happened during a launch that even if it just broke a little bit, it would be out of cycle for maybe, a year, 2 years being repaired.
But you didn't get that. Why?
We kept running into what you might call the Washington problem. The Washington problem is, don't worry me with a problem that hasn't occurred yet. I'll give you enough money to do this year's bit. So we got enough money for 4 shuttles. We did not get enough for 5. We did not get enough for 6 or 7. We got enough for our first launch site, and we had to fight very long and hard to get the other launch sites finally built. In other words, going operational has been a long and tough fight.
Now,
we're not there yet.
I'm sorry to cut you short on this,
Sure.
but what does this mean then? Now, instead of having 4 shuttles, we have only 3. What is that going to mean to those missions that were set for this year? For March, for example, we were going to have this mission that was going to take a real close look at Halley's Comet, right?
Look at the history of accident investigations. They run weeks at least, and a shuttle flight, in my opinion, until that's been well exercised, until we understand what there is. That says that you're at least pushing back the entire schedule, the entire numbers of months. Secondly, you're going to be trying to carry out a long...
To Ms. Smith for a moment now, and for example, the Halley's Comet mission. Halley's Comet is not going to come back again early just because we are inconvenienced. Does that mean that mission goes by the board?
Well, it certainly is going to be much more difficult, There were other observations planned using very high-flying aircraft and ground observations, but clearly the shuttle part of it, I think, is pretty much gone.
You have to report to Congress, to the President, March 1st. Are you still going to be able to do that? And what do you anticipate this incident is going to do to that report?
Well, our report had already slipped somewhat until early April. And in fact, I should mention that General Yeager is one of the 15 commissioners on the commission. It's a little too early right now to know what effect, if any, it will have on the Commission's report, because we really were looking at the very long-term future, and most of our recommendations would not have taken effect until the 90s anyhow. But we were, of course, anticipating having a very healthy shuttle fleet of orbiters to do all the things between now and then that would make our goals realizable.
Now, General Yeager, some of the missions for the shuttle program were civilian missions, some were military missions. Now that the number of shuttles has been reduced by 25%, what does that do to the civilian missions? Because I would assume that the military ones take priority.
Well, yes, there will have to be a priority set, obviously, and what that priority will be will depend upon the present administration, and they seem to place an awful lot of emphasis on defense posture. And also, there's a lot of research that has to do with the so-called Star Wars concept that the shuttle was being used for. And I sort of agree with Marcia. It'll be a while before a decision or any type of reaction is made because of the unfortunate accident today, because it'll take quite some time before a preliminary report comes out of an accident investigation board. And we'll have to wait. And you know, there's a lot of speculation going on, including amongst all of us here. And it'll be a while before any concrete findings come out of this thing and any decisions made.
All right, gentlemen, and Ms. Smith, we're going to come back to this subject, but I want to expand things a little bit further when we come back. In a recent article in Discover magazine, author and historian Alex Rowland suggested that the shuttle was a bad idea from the very beginning. Today's disaster, he now says, could end the program altogether. He'll join us live in a moment. Just last Friday on this program, we focused on the controversy over manned versus unmanned space exploration. Our next guest has no doubts on that question. Joining us live now in our Washington Bureau, Alex Rowland, former historian at NASA and currently a professor of the history of technology at Duke University. Did I overstate things? I saw you smile a little bit there.
Perhaps just a little bit. That is, I'm not...
Stated in your own language.
All right. I'm not categorically opposed to manned space flight, but I am concerned that in our manned space activity to date, we haven't seen missions for the crews that have gone into space that justify the extra expense involved. And I think there are really two kinds of expense. One is the human expense that we've all paid today and watched the astronauts and their families pay. And the other, of course, is the economic expense, that it simply costs more to send people into space. And I'm of the persuasion that almost any mission we can identify to do in space, we can build a machine to do it.
Really?
Cheaper and less dangerously.
The kinds of things that we have seen those shuttle astronauts do, I mean, repairing satellites in space, you can't do that without man up there.
Quite right, you can't do that without a man up there. But for the $15-odd billion that we've spent developing the shuttle, plus the money that we've paid to subsidize it on its 25 flights, we could have built a lot of satellites to replace those that fail in orbit.
All right.
Additionally, I might add that we didn't need the shuttle to do that. That is, we were capable of going up and rendezvousing with satellites before we started the shuttle program.
But the fact of the matter is we have committed to manned flight. Exactly. Therefore, there is a certain momentum that's underway, isn't there?
There surely is. And as a historian, I'm all for momentum. So I realize that we are not about to stop this program now, nor should we. And I think that we run a real risk at a dramatic moment like this in exaggerating the response on both sides. That is, I think several of the people who have already spoken are in a way circling the wagons and defending the program because it looks vulnerable now.
This is Jake Garn, and I definitely am defending the program. There's no doubt about it.
As one of the chief wagon masters, go ahead, sir.
And I completely disagree with Mr. Rowland. I suggest he might spend a little more time with current NASA history than past NASA history, and he'd find out that you need a balance. The only way you're going to have a successful space program is to have a balance between robotics and man. There are many missions that are better done with an unmanned, an extra expendable launch vehicle, and there are others that are better done with man. And I think we've had a very good balance between the two. That balance will continue. I have ordered studies on the space station to force NASA to seek that balance so that it can be a man-tended station at times. At other times, it will operate totally by itself with robotics. We're very, very short-sighted if we don't do both.
Senator, let me bring Mr. Williamson in on this discussion because it fascinates me because the military has not been altogether enchanted with NASA's manned space missions, has it? And I'm wondering...
Ted, I hate to interrupt, but I happen to work on an agreement with NASA and the Air Force where, again, we have achieved some balance. The Air Force agreed to fly 8 missions per year on the shuttle, but we're also refurbishing 10 Titans plus some additionals in the background to provide for backup capability for the military on expendable launch vehicles.
Precisely because there was a certain amount of cynicism within the military about the capacity of NASA to carry out some of the missions that they wanted. Mr. Williamson, though, would you comment on that?
I'd like to make 2 points. One, speaking just to that military question, there's always going to be a slight sense of conflict between civilian objectives and military objectives. And the military, of course, want their own resources under their own control. And the shuttle is a civilian space program under civilian control, and as such is a little beyond their reach. Of course, it's going to be more questionable than their own resources. However, as Jake just pointed out, they are committed to using it. They've made enormous investments, both on the ground and in some of their space hardware, in order to be able to use it well. I'd like, though, to touch on the philosophical question that you were brushing up earlier, man versus unmanned. If we look back at the last 25 years, not just the last 24 missions, what the space program has done, and the manned space program in particular, has been to change people's view of the Earth and of themselves. We are talking about something called hope, I think. If our entire hope really lies only in machinery, in space, without a manned component, a sense of real adventure as well as real accomplishment, and that far future, landing on other planets eventually in time, moving the human race out beyond our own initial little sphere here, then we really lose something if we ignore that aspect of it. And that is what the manned space program, at least symbolically, I think has fed very, very strongly, that sense of real endeavor for Americans, young Americans in particular, and for people around the world.
All right, let me use that as an opportunity to break. We still have a lot more to come in this broadcast. We haven't yet touched on a whole range of questions concerning man in space and the real heroics of venturing into the unknown. We'll be talking shortly with a man who spent his life writing and thinking about those subjects, science fiction writer Ray Bradbury. But first, when we come back, a look at some of the sights and sounds of today's tragedy at the Cape.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
It had become routine, so routine that on this 25th shuttle flight, the 3 major television networks were taping the liftoff from Cape Canaveral for later broadcast. They did not carry it live. NASA, which knows a thing or two about image making, had obviously put some thought into gaining broader public interest. Consider the crew, among them an aerospace engineer whose grandparents were Japanese immigrants, an unmarried Jewish woman who, in addition to her doctorate in electrical engineering, played classical piano, a black PhD in physics from MIT who also held a 5th-degree black belt in karate, and at President Reagan's request, an American high school teacher whose other primary qualifications were her vital interest in spaceflight and her courage. Those are just some of the crew members who set out this morning for what everyone thought would be another routine mission.
This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 3 hours in holding. We're about 3 hours away from today's launch of Mission 51L and about 18 minutes away from picking up the count. And they are posing for their traditional shot during their breakfast. And here comes the flight crew now. Commander Dick Scobie, followed by Mission Specialist Judy Resnick, Ron McNair, and pilot Mike Smith, followed by Krista McCall, teacher in space, Ellison Onizuka, and payload specialist Greg Jarvis.
As they get ready, the teacher observer, Krista McAuliffe, has been handed an apple by the closeout crew. The 51L mission ready to go. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission.
Roger, roll, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Challenger, go and throttle up. 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. The vehicle has exploded. We are now looking at all the contingency operations and awaiting word from any recovery forces in the downrange field. Again, to repeat, we have a report relayed through the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink.
Debris continued to fall for 50 minutes and more, and obviously you can't send aircraft and ships into an area where debris is falling, where they themselves may be endangered.
There are recovery forces in the general area, others being deployed, including aircraft and ships. We saw what we believe to be paramedics parachuting into the impact area.
And at this special moment, let us remember in silent prayer those who were involved in the spacecraft shuttle accident just a few minutes ago off Florida. Let us pray.
The Vice President and the Foreign Policy Advisor, John Poindexter, came in with others and informed the President that the news had just broken. We immediately adjourned our Oval Office meeting and went into an adjoining room, the President's study, where there's a television, and the President then began to review television reports of the explosion there shortly after the launch.
It's a sad day. My heart goes out to Christi's husband, her children. An exciting day has turned into a very sad one.
The terrible disaster. And I remember thinking that in the early days of the space program, we used to sort of half expect something to go wrong, but these days we've become so used to it automatically working and computerized and everything that it's an even bigger shock.
Well, man, they're monitoring systems on their injection into orbit. When it happened, they were caught by surprise, and even if they had been expecting it, they couldn't have done anything about it.
This is Mission Control Houston. Flight controllers reviewing their data here in Mission Control. We will provide you with more information as it becomes available.
These searches have not revealed any evidence that the crew of Challenger survived.
I guess in our human existence there is triumph and there is tragedy. And man tries many things. Sometimes, though, we aren't perfect. And then there's a tragedy that brings us back to our own human frailties.
The President, in consultation with the leadership of Congress, has decided to postpone the State of the Union address that was scheduled for this evening.
I'm reminded of when I was a boy in another age of flight and before the age of television, when I was gathered around a radio with my parents listening to the landing of the Hindenburg and then the resultant explosion and burning of that Hindenburg.
As long as man has the thirst for knowledge, we will continue to press outward. And in the process, there is risk. That risk is taken by each one of us every day, and that risk is understood by all the members of a crew that climb into a loaded spaceship.
I think that the NASA and the Congress will examine this question of whether we have not been premature in encouraging civilians to fly.
It's a surprise to me that it happened, but I would go again tomorrow. If NASA would let me go, I would go again.
And it has cleared the tower.
We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Joining our other guests when we return, a man with a very special perspective on our triumphs and our tragedies in space, Ray Bradbury. He has been gazing at the stars much longer than most of us and with a great deal more vision than most of us. For 40 years, writers of science fiction, and he joins us now live from our Los Angeles bureau. And as always, Ray, you look far beyond today. So give us a taste as you see as being the ultimate culmination of manned spaceflight.
Well, I was out at JPL on Saturday for the Uranus encounter, and on that day it was an exhilaration that reminded us that we were alive in a very strange and beautiful universe. Now, a day like today teaches us the reverse, that we are also capable of dying. And then we ask the reason for this. Why are we exhilarated one day and destroyed the next? And I was reminded of a thing that I saw on television some years ago when Carl Sagan was showing us the structure of DNA molecules and enzymes of all things. And I thought, just 2 days ago, I wrote an article about this, where the universe shouts at us, and the universe is the universal enzyme, and we are these massive molecules of DNA, and we respond. For secret reasons, we've come alive in the universe, and we love the gift of life. So on Saturday, we celebrated the fact that we lived, and today we discover that we have to die in order to go on celebrating.
Now, you spoke to me earlier this afternoon about the possibility of outer space providing us with an answer to the wars that we have been fighting. I'd love to be able to bring this program to some kind of a positive conclusion. We've brushed against so many different subjects. Go ahead, and then we'll go around among all our guests.
Well, yes, we've always needed to be tested. That we like to know that we are strong, that we are imaginative, that we have willpower. Toynbee, many years ago, in his various books, spoke of the challenge of the future rushing upon us and challenging us to survive. We survive in many ways. Too often in the past, we have survived by destroying one another. And the wars of the past have been futile and ridiculous to most of us. Now all of a sudden we discover we have a war worth fighting. In other words, in the long night of time, we humans on this earth, in the middle of this universe, have a challenge. What is the challenge? Gravity, space, time, death, and darkness. Therefore, space travel has always meant to me our endeavor to fight the good fight, the best war, the one that's really worth winning, the positive war against time and death. And if we win that, with all the sacrifices that come with it, moving on out to the moon, to Mars, and then to Alpha Centauri someday, we will have won the supreme battle, and we'll go on living forever after that.
Now, Marcia Smith, as you begin to prepare your report that goes to the President, that goes to Congress, is that a little bit too philosophical, a little bit too poetic, a little bit too far out, no pun intended?
Well, we are very philosophical and far out at the Commission, and I'm not quite sure how far out we're going to be in our ultimate report. I'm not sure how much what happened today is going to affect our report. I would like to respond, however, to something that Alex Rowland said, and greatly take exception with what he said about machines being able to do everything that people can do. In the Soviet space program, they've already found out, for example, that the human eye looking down at an ocean sees very different things than a sensor looking down at an ocean. It can see patterns in the waves that the sensors can't see. Maybe someday we'll be able to build robot spacecraft that can exactly mimic what the human systems can do. But so far, we don't have that capability.
All right, quickly, Mr. Rowland, a response from you. I want to give everyone just a chance to quickly round it off.
Surely. I'd like to remind everyone that we have designed a machine to go to Mars to perform the most complicated of missions, that is, determine if there's life there, and we succeeded with the machine in sending it there, orbiting it, sending it down to the surface, collecting samples and testing for life. Any society that can build a machine like that can build machines to do lots of the things our astronauts are doing in space. Not all of them, but lots of them. And I don't think we should engage that cost and the human risk any more than we have to.
General Yeager, you, for so many of us, personify the man in the cockpit, the man in the shuttle.
Well, Ted, I've seen a lot of programs come and go over my career as a military pilot, both in combat, research, and have watched the space program. I've seen many accidents very similar to what we have seen today. And a lot of people make a lot of comments, but it boils down, we find out what caused the accident, fix it, and press on. And there's a lot of people, fortunately, in this country who are aggressive enough to make these programs work. And that's the way it's going to be, in my opinion, from now on.
All right. I have really wanted more time to give so many guests a little more opportunity to say something more. I just hope you'll accept that I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for joining us here this evening. Every loved one left behind setting out for the unknown has felt it, a bittersweet mixture of pride and fear that simply won't go away until the voyage is over. And when we come back, we'll hear a poem written by the wife of an astronaut who journeyed to the moon. Somehow, in her words, she managed to capture that special feeling. And finally, a few words in behalf of those left behind, the wives, parents, husband, and children of the 7 astronauts who died today. There is a courage and a generosity of spirit required of those who stay behind that was captured in a poem written by Patricia Collins for her husband, Michael. Michael Collins was an astronaut who flew safely, as it turned out, aboard Gemini 10 and Apollo 11. Mrs. Collins titled her poem, "To a Husband Who Must Seek the Stars." In your eyes the first glad token, as when first our love we proved, so your mind to mine has spoken, just as if your lips had moved. You are saying, yes, I know that the lure of space beguiles. You are pleading, let me go, not unwilling, but with smiles. Can you love me and still choose whispers that I cannot hear? Late to love, how can I bear to lose content for some inconstant sphere? Tell me how you see my role, to stay, to wait, yet yearn to go. Where is the comfort for my soul? You, my love, have helped me know. I'll be unafraid, undaunted, yes, of course. I need not face any peril or be haunted by the hazards you embrace. I could have sought by wit or wile your bright dream to dim, and yet, if I'd swayed you with a smile, my reward would be regret. So, for once you shall not hear of the tears unbidden welling, or the nighttime stabs of fear. These, this time, are not for telling. Take my silence, though intended, fill it with the joy you feel. Take my courage, now pretended. You, my love, will make it real. I'll be back in a moment. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.